So extension mobility is one of the most complicated topics, in my opinion, on the CCIE collaboration blueprint, and let's have a quick chat about it. So in the topology we've got a couple of clusters, and what I'm going to do is draw up a scenario where we have a device profile. Yes, I've got two phones over here at the headquarters cluster. But I'm going to have a device profile which I'm going to call UDP, user device profile. Okay, UDP, and then HQ1. And this is in effect what's loaded onto the phone when a user logs in using the extension mobility service. Okay, so we're going to get this working intra-cluster within the headquarters site first. So we're going to go over to one of these phones and log in, and we should see our extension number. Now at the moment this is 2001 and this is 2002. I'm going to make this just extension 2222. Keep it nice and easy. Rolls off the tongue really well, that does. 2222. Alright, so I've got a little bit of a checklist here that I'm going to create as we go along, and I think this video is going to focus more on the cross-cluster element of it. And so I'm going to assume that a lot of these tasks are done. I'm just going to assume that we are all familiar that there needs to be a web service that needs to be enabled. The phones itself need to be enabled for extension mobility, create the user device profile, and the end user needs association with that device profile. Okay, so very quickly, let's just have a quick look at the headquarters site, and the phone services is added, and you can use the same phone service for extension mobility cross cluster as you can for extension mobility. Okay, you can make this enterprise wide or enterprise subscription so that everybody's registered to it. Alright, I'm actually on the wrong cluster here. Let me get back on the headquarter cluster. You need the service on both clusters, because what's going to happen is this HQ user is going to go over to site B and log in on a phone over there. So you obviously need to have the service registered or service created on both of the clusters. Okay, so let's have a quick look then. The phone service is over here, created. Who needs? I would make an enterprise subscription in a lab environment, cheap and dirty way of doing it. But the phone needs to be subscribed to this service so you can log in, and the device profile needs to be assigned or subscribed to this service to log out. Okay, so the person, the device logging in, and the profile to log out. The phone itself, I've got a couple of phones over here at headquarters. I can't remember which one is enabled for device mobility. Sorry, not device, extension mobility. Alright, so we can enable it on here. And I'm sure the other phone already has it enabled. I'll check that in a second. Okay, way down at the bottom of the device settings then, on the device page, not that far down though, we've got extension mobility checkbox enabled. Let's have a quick look then at the checklist that I'm building up. I've got number 1 done it on both clusters. And everything really we're doing, we're mirroring on the site B cluster. Okay, so pretty much everything we are doing in this checklist needs to be done on both clusters. Got the extension mobility enabled. Let's go in and check that we've got the device profile added, and I've called it UDP HQ phone 2, and the number there is 2222. We're going to come to this new setting here, which is very complicated to understand, but we'll come to that in just a few moments. Alright, so step number 3 is done, and you'd obviously have a site B profile to log into the HQ cluster, the mirror of what I'm going to be doing. Finally then, for the intra-cluster component, this is all intra-cluster extension mobility related tasks, nothing to do with cross-cluster. And so we've got the end users association to the actual device profile. Let's have a quick look there. HQ2 is what I'm doing, and we should see the below that there is the available profile. Let's just do the association right there, and we do have a checkbox somewhere. Let me just do that right now, so that he or she is allowed to use or use this device profile on another cluster. Okay, so without further ado, let's just quickly test that we can actually log in on one of the HQ phones and load up the device profile with extension 2222. So here we are. Here's the phone I'm looking at, this one here. Okay, and currently it's 2002, and I press the settings button, and then there you have it, the EMCC service appears. I'm then prompted to enter my user ID and PIN. Let me just make sure. Okay, it's HQ2, so let me just remove the S there, and I don't want to get this wrong, so let me make this the universal PIN number for Cisco lab environments 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I hope it's just lab environments, not real world environments. Alright, so let's now log in. I'm going to just not make you suffer with me as I type this in. I'm going to pause the video and just magically resume when it's all been entered. Okay, I'm at the point where I've typed everything in. I am pressing submit. It says login successful. Takes a bit of a while to catch up, does the phone, the 9971. And what I can see, I'm going to give you the description of what's happening. It's successful. It worked. Amazing. It worked first time. Okay, and I can see, well, let's just pause the video here, and we'll see in just a few moments here that extension 2222 has been enabled. Let me just make sure I can log out. I get the EMCC service. The device profile is subscribed to the EMCC service, and I'm able to log out, and the phone's going to revert back to the original device settings, which was extension 2002. Alright, so far so good. Intra-cluster extension mobility is done. Again, in real life, you're probably going to be doing this on both clusters, but I'm not sure what that was, what that scribbly line was. Let's just draw a line under that. We are good up to that point. Let's now conceptually talk about EMCC, extension mobility cross cluster. So this cluster where the user device profile is located shall be known from this moment forward as the home cluster. Okay, and this, I'm going to reference the terminology that is used in the documentation. Kind of makes sense if you know what I mean. Alright, this is the visiting cluster, because my device profile is assigned or created, and the end user is created in the home cluster. This contains the end user, the device profile, and that's added in the database. I go on a plane and I go over to site B, all the way over to site B, and I'm going to log in on this phone. So the user device profile is going to log in on a visiting phone which is registered to the visiting cluster. So this is a visiting phone. Now we need to have a lot of things set up. For example, the certificates between the two clusters. We are exchanging information continuously between the two. And what's going to happen is when I log in on this phone using the device profile created over here in the home cluster, the Site B Core Manager is going to find out if that user is local, and if it's not local, going to find out which of the other clusters it's created on. In our case, there's only one other cluster. It's going to be the HQ cluster. And what's going to happen is a configuration file will be built and will issue a reset of the phone. This phone will be reset, When it then does a TFTP get of its configuration file, the new core manager is going to be where the home cluster of this particular user. So this visiting phone will register to a headquarters to the other cluster. That's weird, isn't it? The Site B phone over here is registered to the Site B cluster, and then when I come in log in on the phone, it will unregister from there and register back to where the user device profile and the user is created, which is the home cluster. Well, that's unusual, but that's what happens. We need to have EMCC devices created temporarily that will in effect be used as placeholder devices whilst visiting phones are registered to the home cluster. So that's part of our task. We've got a lot of work with certificates. They need to know about each other. They're continuously synchronizing between the two, so the certificates is one of the most difficult challenges. It's difficult in the sense that it's time consuming. You need to upload certificates from both of these clusters to an SFTP server, consolidate, and then bring them back down again so they know about each other. When this visiting phone registers back to the home cluster, you need these temporary EMCC devices that will be created. Alright, so that's half the challenge. Alright, so there's a few other things that we need to talk about. We'll get there in a second. So I'm going to draw a line under that, literally draw a line under steps 1 through 4. And then let's talk about the next few steps, which are related specifically to EMCC. So we now have to go in and let's just draw another quick diagram. We now have to upload certificates from the B cluster to an SFTP server, which is shared, and the HQ cluster uploads the certificates there. So upload them both. Then we consolidate. In other words, we merge the two certificates into one file, and we only need to do that from one of the clusters. It needs to be done once. So upload on B, upload on HQ, consolidate from HQ, and then download the consolidated file to both of the clusters. That's the first task that I've got listed here under EMCC tasks, or the first 3 tasks I should say. So let's go ahead and do that right away. So this is under OS admin. I can do whatever I'm doing on one cluster, mirror it on the other. Okay, so going through, I've already got an SFTP server set up. I can use the Mac that I'm working on right now, or I've got one in my CollabCert rack, which is the HQ PC. I spared you the ordeal I went through in waiting for the SFTP server to respond, and this is the HQ cluster. I'm going to export all the certificates from here now, just like it did on the Site B cluster, and that says update successful, and now I can consolidate on one of the clusters, and then we're going to import the consolidated certificates. Okay, close that, and now we can import on both of the clusters so they know about each other. This is the most painful part of extension mobility cross cluster. Okay, and so we're going to import here. And let's hope for the best that actually worked. Okay, so back to our checklist. So what I've done there is I've done the export from both of the servers. I've consolidated from one of the servers and ported into both of the clusters. Phew. So let's now look at the next step, which is going to create these EMCC templates. Now these are placeholder devices, going back a couple of slides here, when the user HQ1 or HQ2, whatever it was, has logged in on the visiting phone registered to the visiting cluster. Remember, this phone is reset and it registers back to the home cluster. Well, this phone here is not provisioned in that cluster, okay? That phone is registered to the Site B cluster, not in HQ. So we need a temporary placeholder device, which is the EMCC template device, or the EMCC devices that are used to house, if you like, these visiting phones that are registering. So this is the next step. Alright, so let's get out of OS admin. And I'm going to be going from HQ to Site B. So I need to do this on the Site B cluster. This is Site B. Alright, so we don't really need to scale this up. We've only got one user logging in or onto a visiting phone and one visiting phone registering to us. I think I have this the other way around. The HQ user is going to go over to Site B and the Site B phone will register back to the HQ cluster. So I need to be doing this on, well, you can do it on both to be honest, but we really need to have this in my example on the HQ cluster. So let me very quickly go back there. And you may want to test this both ways. So mirror everything you're doing on HQ over to Site B. So over here, bulk admin, we've got EMCC, and we first of all need to create a template. I've already added one in there. And all we're doing here is saying what the device pool will be for any of these phones that are not added in my database, that they're coming in from a visiting cluster. What the device pool will be, what the SIP profile are using security, etc., and common device configuration, etc. I'm just leaving it to the defaults. So once we've got the template defined, we then need to add the actual devices. So let me remind you, this phone, which is not defined in HQ, will register to HQ and will consume the place of one of these EMCC devices. And I have 5 in there already, but what we would need to do is insert, let me just insert a couple more, insert 2 more with the template that we just created. We want to run this immediately. We always want to go down to the job scheduler to check on the status of that, and we can see that we've got 2 records successfully created. So in total we now have 7. Alright, so that is that step complete. Alright, so I've created that template, the EMCC template, and I've created the devices. Let's just take a very simple example. Let's talk about date time, the time zone of the phone. My Site B is in the Eastern Standard Time, UTC -5. And over here, headquarters is in Pacific. This is Pacific time -8. So when I have this phone register back to the HQ cluster, I want to preserve the correct time. Now that's just one of the things I want to preserve. I've got other considerations. I've got things like my calling search space that I can add. In other words, I don't always want to register to the same device pool as these phones over here in the headquarter cluster. So when this phone comes to register back to the home cluster, one thing that is mandatory with EMCC is geolocation filters. What we need to do as part of this registration is we're going to send our geolocation. I'm just going to call it, we're in Site B. The geolocation is going to be sent across to the home cluster as part of the registration, and what we're going to have here is a roaming device pool inside the headquarters for Site B. So we'll have this roaming device pool equal to B. And I'm just really focusing on something very simple, which is the time. And I'm going to have date time group equal to B, which is going to be the Eastern Standard Time. So the geolocation will be used when the phone is registering to the home cluster. It will be used by the home cluster to determine where is the location of the visiting phone, and then we can attach or bind a device pool to that phone. So let's just say we have a third cluster, Site C cluster, that's in the UK. The geolocation will be sent to HQ, and we'll have a roaming device pool for Site C, or the UK site or cluster. Alright, so we'll have one roaming device pool for every cluster that is enabled for extension mobility cross-cluster. I won't do that just yet. I just thought I'd mention it. This would be the next thing I would do logically in my process. I would add geolocation filters. As it turns out, I will just ignore these steps for the time being, but we're going to see that we cannot enable EMCC without at least having a filter, geolocation filter set. So ignoring the geolocation, we'll wait for the error. The next thing that I need to have is a SIP trunk. Alright, so let's just analyze what's going to happen here. So we got this, let me go back a couple of pages to my original diagram. In fact, that's way too messy now. So we've got this Site B phone over here registered to the HQ cluster. And when I dial a number, let's just say it's going to be 911. Alright, that's just very easy for me to say. I'm going to call 911. I'm going to be analyzing the route patterns in which partitions. In other words, which calling search base am I going to be using? Remember, this phone is not defined inside this cluster, but what is defined is the user device profile. Remember, the user device profile of HQ Phone 2 that we set up initially? That is defined there. We've also got the DN, which was 2222. This was HQ2, I think. So we can use the calling search bases that are defined here. So remember I talked about, or briefly mentioned, that there is a new setting inside the HQ cluster. We've got the user device profile down here. Alright, so this is a visiting phone registering with this profile loaded onto it, and we have this new setting specific for extension mobility cross cluster. So when I call a number such as 911 or any other extension number or any long distance international number, I'm going to be using a concatenation of the CSS defined on the user device profile and the DN. There is also and I'm just going to very briefly get rid of that. There is something called the adjunct CSS that we'll come to in just a few moments. It's actually a concatenation of all three calling search spaces, and I'll tell you the purpose of this calling search space in just a few moments. And it is in this order of prioritization. The adjunct CSS is the highest priority. It's concatenated with the DN and then the user device profile. The device isn't defined inside this cluster. That's why we have this new setting here for extension mobility cross cluster, the CSS inside the user device profile. So if I call 911, let's just assume it's in a calling search space visible by the UDP. Let's just say CSS HQ, and this is just HQ. Well, we can see that route pattern and we can make the call. If I have, or I'm not using the standard local route group, I put route list HQ, go out the HQ gateway. Well, what's going to happen is this. I'm over in Site B, I'm over here, okay, and I dial 911 and it's going to go out this gateway here. It's going to go out of HQ gateway because the calling search space 911 goes out of HQ gateway. Okay, the phone's registered over here. I dial 911, goes out there. Is there a problem with that? I think so. Okay, I'm physically located in Site B. The phone happened to register to the home cluster. I dial 911, it's gone out the wrong gateway. That's totally wrong. How do we rectify this situation? In this situation, we should not use the routeless HQ. We should use a standard local route group. I'm going to just quickly change color there because that's difficult to see. The standard local route group with extension mobility cross cluster has a different purpose. What will happen is quite confusing. It will use the SIP trunk I'm about to add to send the call back over to the visiting cluster. So this phone, the phone I'm logging in on, has registered back to the HQ cluster, dial 911. It then uses the standard local route group. What this means is don't use the originating device pool. There is no originating device pool. This phone's not in the database over here. The standard local route group has special meaning when we've got extension mobility cross cluster being used. What will happen is the HQ cluster, now this is going to be kind of difficult to draw, the HQ cluster, okay, is going to use the outgoing SIP trunk for EMCC. Call's going to come into site B, and we are going to be using the SIP trunk CSS over here on site B to route the call onwards to 911. Okay, and that's going to go out the site B gateway. So let me just go through that one more time. The phone is registered, not to site B anymore, it's registered over to the home cluster, HQ. If I dial 911, we're using the route pattern defined in the HQ cluster. Whoops. Okay, we're using the route pattern defined here. Because it goes to standard local route group, or it should do, we're going to be using the SIP trunk over to site B and then hit the route pattern over here to take the call out of R2, which is my site B gateway. And that makes sense because I'm physically located here and I want it to go out of this gateway. If I didn't use standard local route group, it's going to go out of R1 over here and the cop's going to turn up in the wrong location. Okay, so this SIP trunk needs to be added on both of the clusters because I can't just send an invite message without the other cluster knowing about my source address. So I've got the EMCC SIP trunks defined on both of these clusters already. Nothing special, device pool, not a whole lot inside there. I don't put an IP address because this is a template SIP trunk. For every cluster that's joining my EMCC network, there will be a SIP trunk created automatically between the clusters. It'll be a full mesh. Okay, so here's the SIP trunk EMCC. There's no IP address we define here. Okay, not a whole lot, nothing special in there. Obviously, I save and reset, and we're on step 12 now. And let's just go to EMCC feature configuration. All right, let's go down here, feature configuration, and I need to put the IP addresses on my pub and the sub. The region settings of device pools for a visiting phone are never used. The region settings of the EMCC parameters defined here are what is going to be used. So we must make sure that these settings are standardized across all the clusters participating in the EMCC network. Okay, the region setting of the device pool I'm going to be using temporarily when I'm registered to the home cluster will not be used. This is the setting that will be. I skipped over the geolocation filter. Let's just say I didn't create a filter. All right, there's no asterisk there, so when I first did this I thought, well, this is not mandatory, let me continue. Let's just also talk about remote cluster update interval. Every 15 minutes, the default's 30, we're going to exchange information between the other clusters when new users are added, new device profiles, etc., etc. So when I try and save that, and then I go to, that's the feature configuration, let's go to service profile, let's validate that. It tells me there's got to be a filter added to activate the EMCC service, so that's not actually running right now. So going back a couple of steps that I missed earlier, the geolocation filter, let me just go through that one more time. Alright, what will happen is when I register to the home cluster, tidy that up a bit. Okay, not really concerned about the routing at this point in time. We're registering to the home cluster. I'm going to send my geolocation information. I'm going to call it site B. I'm in B, country B or town B or township B, whatever. And I'm going to have a device pool here equal to B. Okay, and the geolocation configuration here will be B, and we'll detect that there's a match. And then this phone will be temporarily placed in the roaming device pool of site B. So let me go through and do that right now. So I've got the geolocation configuration and the filter down below. Let's have a look at the filter first. This is the bit that's mandatory, and I don't need to put, we've only got 2 sites, don't need that level of granularity. So let me just go with country. Going to be country. I'm going to send the country whenever I'm registering back to the home cluster. And then I will go to the configuration, and I'm going to be calling this country site B. Oops. The name's site B, yeah. Country site B, SB. Okay, and I'm going to go over here. This is the site B. And I've got the filter here to be exactly the same. Don't need that level of granularity. And then I've got the configuration. And it's site B. So I'm going to assign this to the phone. This phone is going to register back to that cluster. I need to send my geolocation to the home cluster. So I need to attach this geolocation to the phone or the device pool of the phone. So either I can go to the phone. This is the phone I'm going to be logging in onto in site B. This is this phone over here. And I can assign the geolocation down here. I can say, B, when you register back to the home cluster, send this geolocation, country equals SB. Or I can do it on the device pool level if you've got a collection of devices that will be used for extension mobility. Okay, and I'm in the default device pool. Down here I should see the geolocation SB. So I've given this phone geolocation, I'm in country SB. What we now need is a device pool in headquarters that has the geolocation SB assigned to it. So jumping over to the home cluster now, going to create a roaming device pool. Okay, let me just call it roaming B, and I've got a specific date time group, so I'm going to be displaying the right time. And geolocation is going to be set here, so there'll be a match in effect when the phone that's not defined in my database tries to register with me. I'm going to look at the geolocation and see there's a match. I'm going to put this phone temporarily in the roaming B device pool. Okay, I've got to reset everything there. At this point in time, we are almost at the point where we are good to go. Let's go back to my checklist. Alright, I've done it the opposite here. I just used site B in reality, and here it says HQ. So now I should go back to the EMCC feature configuration and set the filter, and it's already there. And let me just check on the other cluster. Then when I go to the service profile, I can now make that active, save it, and validate this time. Should succeed, it does. Let's go over to the other cluster, and the similar sort of service parameters, the IP address of the call manager, TFTP, set the region, make the timer identical across all the clusters. So they're updating each other every 15 minutes. And let's go down and validate that everything's working according to plan. Final step is we need to go down to cluster view. I need to add, I'm on HQ right now, I need to add Site B as a cluster. Now the cluster ID, this is defined under enterprise parameters, and the default of standalone cluster will not suffice because that's the same across all clusters and it wouldn't be unique in that case. So I've called that HQ and I've called the other guy probably B or SB. There we go. So now let's go in and add each other as a cluster. And then the EMCC synchronization is going to take place. So here I am on HQ. I'll add SB. And I will put the IP address of the remote cluster in there. Whoops, what's going on here then? Looks like it might already be there. Let me just do a quick find, see if it's already there. It is already there, okay? Right, so I've already done that task. Let me go over here to the remote cluster and make sure you have the IP address here. Here I don't have, not sure if that's going to work. Let's just check this in a second. Okay, so all right, seems to be working okay. Okay, so we've got to see the IP addresses of the other cluster listed over here. Okay, we've got to enable the services that we want to use. In worst case, enable all services and update the remote cluster with all the information. So same thing over here on the Site B. Got to see the IP addresses. Here I see the publisher and the subscriber. Alright, at this point in time, we might be good to go. Let's just try. Okay, I'm gone in on the Site B phone here in the bottom left, and I've logged in as HQ2, and it's surprisingly going through. The phone actually says on it right now, device in roaming location. Okay, let's just wait for that to update one more time. Alright, so we have a situation then. I've gone on the Site B phone as an HQ user. Okay, HQ user. I'm drawing the same diagram over and over again because it is fairly complicated. Is going on the Site B phone. This is reset. It was registered to the Site B cluster, which is the visiting cluster, VC. Okay, it was registered there. No longer. It registers back to the home cluster. We are in effect at this point in time using an EMCC device. We send our geolocation across. Hopefully there's a match here. This is the HQ cluster. I can see all the information. This is where the actual phone is registered. Okay, a little bit confusing, but you can always go, it's very useful to see actively logged in, remotely logged in. This is the home cluster. I think I have the opposite way around. This is the home cluster. I can see remotely logged in devices. And notice here the roaming device pool is Site B. It detected the geolocation. So if I now go in and I'm going to actually, you don't need to unregister anything right now. I can go in and the roaming device pool. And if I removed that geolocation over down here, and if I just reset that, at this stage the phone is resetting. What I'm expecting to happen is the phone sending its geolocation, but there's no device pool that has a geolocation of B. So what will happen is we're just going to use the default EMCC template setting, which has me placed in the default device pool. So you would have seen me the remote device using the roaming B device pool. So when I wait for this to come back and now we've changed that to default because the geolocation is not being set in the roaming device pool. So you can see here the time of this Site B phone, okay, is the same as the other phones, which is this one here and this one here. It's the same time, although we're in the Eastern time zone here, and these phones are legitimately in the Pacific time zone. So this is one of the reasons why you do want to have a roaming device pool. Okay, not the only reason. You got this adjunct CSS looming in a little bit, which is even more complicated. So let's go back and reverse that. Let me add in the geolocation back on the roaming device pool. You need one per cluster that you have inside your EMCC network. Where is geolocation? Down there. Let me just give that a quick reset. Alright, let's now talk about core routing while this phone comes back and registers. So lots of scribbling going on, but scribbling is what it's all about. EMCC is about scribbling. Okay, I'm going to draw the same diagram over and over again. I'm going to have this Site B phone registered. I'm going to make it less and less scribble every time. It's registered to the home cluster. I'm going to dial 911. Well, remember, which search spaces are we going to be using? Well, we've got the user device profile defined here, HQ2, and we've got extension DN2222, and we've got a concatenation of the two calling search spaces with the DN higher priority than that. Let me just keep it simple. Let me just have a calling search space on the user device profile. Just before we do that, let's just have a look at this phone again. So now, because it's, and I'm going to go back on the home cluster where the phone is registered. I'm going to go in and look at phones that are remote to me, that are logged in. And now we're back at the roaming B device pool. This is the purpose of geolocation, and the most tangible way of seeing that in action is the time on the phone. So we were previously in the same time zone as these two phones, which are in HQ. We're registered to HQ cluster, but we've got our right time zone. Okay, that's great. So the geolocation piece, I think I've proven to you, is working. So going back to the core routing, I'm going to dial 911, and over in HQ, the home cluster, I'm going to just put this in test, make it invisible to everybody, and hopefully the call will fail. Let's just see how we get on with that. So this is the home cluster, and I've got 911 in. Let's just put this in a partition that's kind of hidden. It's test. So at this point in time, I'm going to try and make the call to 911. What am I trying to prove here? Just want to make sure that it is indeed going to fix the problem by assigning a CSS on the device profile. So let me just make the call from this phone where the device profile is loaded onto. If I just press 9, okay, so I can't see anything beginning with 9. If I now go and assign a calling search space that contains the test partition, and it says I need to log out and log back in, I can confirm that is actually the case. So I'm going to go ahead and do that behind the scenes. Okay, so what I'm expecting to happen is I should be able to call, and this is the critical piece about standard local route group. If I'm routing it to R1, then it's going to go out of R1 gateway, although I'm in Site B. Okay, that's no good. If I take it out of standard local route group, well, the standard local route group meaning is different now. What's going to happen is it's going to go over from this cluster to this cluster using the EMCC SIP trunks that we created. and then we'll be routing the call based on the trunk CSS over here. Let's talk about that in just a few moments. Right now, I'm in site B. You can see I've already done the call. I've cheated. Just gave away the plot. Call 911. You can see it's going out of the R1 gateway. I'm in site B. It's going out of the HQ gateway. Not very good. Let's now adjust the route pattern to point to the standard local route group rather than just the physical route group. And because normally standard local route group means that we're going to go to the originator's device pool LRG setting. In this case, it doesn't mean that at all. It means we're going to be using the EMCC SIP trunk. So now is a good time for me to go in and take a look at the call. Going to look at the call using RTMT. I'm going to log in on the site B cluster. Whoops. And inside here, okay, click on the Call Manager tab, and I'm going to just make this call one more time. We should see it go out of R2.
Call cannot be
well, that could be something else, but let's just see if the call comes in to the Site B cluster. Alright, so I've just clicked on real-time data. Going to look at the last 5 minutes worth of calls to see if something did come in. And you can see it did. So the piece that's going to help me troubleshoot this is nothing to do with the home cluster, nothing to do with the HQ, because the call is utilizing the EMCC SIP trunk. So if I just draw that back on my scribbly diagram, the call, when I use SLRG, it is using the EMCC SIP trunk, but the call's failing over in the Site B cluster. So it is actually using the trunk that we are specifying actually here, the PSTN access. This is related to when we have a route pattern that's been hit that's pointing to the standard local route group. It's going to be using this SIP trunk, which is our EMCC SIP trunk. So it does get into the visiting cluster where the phone is physically located, and we've got a 404 not found that suggests that the route pattern is not there or it's invisible. Well, let's go now to the visiting cluster. So it's helped me troubleshoot then. RTMT has really helped me narrow down where the problem is. I would have spent half an hour working on the wrong cluster had I not done that. Okay, now what will happen is the call being received by the Site B cluster, visiting cluster. Okay, the call is going to be received, and we're going to be using, in this case, we'll be receiving for the incoming call the CSS. The default is actually trunk CSS. We can actually use the phone CSS because the phone is defined here, remember. So let's put it back to the default. And let's just see if we even have a route pattern for 911 calls. It's over there. It's in route pattern partition. So let me just have on the trunk calling search base a calling search base that can see that partition. Inbound calls, calling search base, and which one would it be? Probably the translation. Let's just put that one in there. While the trunk is resetting, let me just confirm that it does contain that. It does. So at this point in time, if there is a Lord anywhere on this planet, this will work. Oh ho ho ho. Okay, so let's just confirm that it did go out of R2. It did. We need to work on caller ID because it's not very good. So what we have is this unusual calling number going out to the PSTN. let's just take a look at the route pattern. The route pattern that we're hitting, bearing in mind that the calling phone, the invite coming in to this cluster is 4-digit extension number 2222. And we've got some mask of 3 X's, but there's only 4 digits. We can't mask to more than the number of digits that are existing. So what we'd have to do then is put in a prefix here of, let's make it a fully globalized number, +1 408 202. That's my prefix, and hopefully that will look a bit better. So I'm going to look on R2 again and make the call, and there the caller ID is much better. Alright, so that's how we got 911 calls working using the SLRG, using the outgoing SIP trunk for PSTN access. Then the receiving cluster, the visiting cluster, will be using the CSS defined in the EMCC features, and we will need to see this route pattern, and we'll point it out of the gateway. It doesn't really matter here if you're using SLRG or R2 in my case, because this is the right gateway. We are physically located. I am here. That's a picture of me. I'm on that phone. Okay, so one final thing that needs to be mentioned then is the adjunct CSS. Everything I've talked about, okay, when we've got this again, it's going to be the same diagram again every time. Alright, we've got the phone, the visiting phone going to the home cluster. The phone's not defined there, but the user device profile and the DN is defined there. What happens if this was in the United Kingdom, where we've got a different dialing domain? So when I fly over to London, I'm logging in. This is Vik on this phone. In fact, let me just draw myself again. Okay. Handsome chap that I am on that phone, not. Okay. And I'm in London, and I want to call emergency services, always emergency services, to come and get me. Okay. I'm going to be dialing 999. Let's try that again. 999. That is the emergency services number in the United Kingdom. 911 doesn't mean anything. So would you really expect to have this route pattern defined over in here in my US cluster? Okay, remember, I'm physically located here, but that phone has unregistered from this cluster and registered to the home cluster, which is where I'm from. Okay, and this is the route pattern that will need to be defined over here. Well, it wouldn't be defined, would it? Why would you have the world's dial plan configured on your cluster in San Jose or wherever it is? It just wouldn't happen. So what we can do then, in such situations where you don't really want to have this UK dial plan visible to anybody else in the US North American numbering plan, you can have an adjunct CSS, okay, for the UK in this case, and put this in the UK partition. And this will only ever be used in the case of EMCC, when we've got the geolocation for UK, and we've got a roaming device pool equal to UK, and the adjunct CSS of UK is being used, and only these phones that have registered, that are physically located in the United Kingdom, registered to the home cluster, would only ever see these route patterns. So this is completely invisible unless there is a guy who is from the home cluster that's gone over to UK and logged in using the EMCC profile defined over here. So this is the purpose of adjunct CSS, to define route patterns that are not part of the home cluster's geographic dial plan, if you like, a different dialing domain. The adjunct CSS has top priority above the user device profile CSS and the DN CSS. So when you've got a roaming device profile, or you've got a visiting phone registered to a home cluster, you've got the adjunct CSS, you've got the user device profile, you've got the DN here, and you've got the user device profile. You've got 3 CSSs, order of importance 1, 2, and 3. Typically, these are used only when you've got different dialing domains involved. Otherwise, you don't need to use this. The adjunct CSS would be configured on the roaming device pool. There is a setting there. And here it is. We would configure it here. This would be used if the phone that is registering back to the home cluster is in a different dialing domain. Okay, I've covered a lot there with extension mobility cross-cluster. The next series of videos in the CollabCert modules is related to RSVP, SIP preconditions, and how that works. But thank you for watching this EMCC video, and I hope the scribbling wasn't too confusing. You can always find me at www.collabcert.com. My name is Vik Malhi, the instructor for the CCIE Collab Lab exam that we are offering. Thank you for watching.